apologies.
Good morning, everyone. Have 11 members present today and no apologies.
Thank you. Declarations of interest? No. Minutes of the meeting of the 30th of October. Happy to agree?
Okay, yep.
Thank you. Right, we'll move on to the first full item on the agenda this morning, which is the Health and Safety Progress Report. We have a report in front of us, but is there any additional information that you would like to put forward before we...
To answer any questions to the members if they like, or I can go through the report if that's it.
I noticed, just before we start, I noticed that the report and the plans for the period of 1st of April to the 30th of September 2014, there are a number of issues which I'm sure members will raise on these documents today, and before we start with them, I just wonder if there's any update or progress from September to now, please.
Yeah, I'm just going to... Would you like me to go on to the exception report perhaps and appendix 3 then on the page? Of particular most probably interest to members. The Corporate Health and Safety Manual has been subject, basically within the last 4 months we had a safety advisor. There was a vacancy within the Corporate Health and Safety team. I do actually only have 2 safety advisors working through to me that are fully qualified to do audits, etc. So the fact that one was missing on the vacancy did mean that we had to reprioritise the workload. But I'm happy to say that that post has now been filled, and so we are back on schedule now and programmed in to do the audits and to review the manuals, etc. So some of the work here is now been reprogrammed to be back on schedule because we have that post filled. As far as the property and architectural services, again we had 2 officers leaving within the property and architectural services field, and despite the commitment of the senior manager of property and architectural services and some work being undertaken, the resourcing has been really challenging with 2 officers leaving, and that resource has been reprioritised at the moment.
Thank you. I have some councillors who wish to speak. Councillor Geddes.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. That, of course, would be the issue, as far as I'm concerned, in this report, which concerns me by far the greatest extent. I would have to say that despite the extenuating circumstances that Sue's alluded to, I don't think that that's any justification for us finding where we are in relation to this. If you look, Chair, at your Appendix 2, it talks about reviewing corporate building safety policy and guidance. Now, that, as far as I'm concerned, is fundamental. There's implications for everyone, you know, for staff, employees, for people who are members of the public, etc., as well as elected members. And this has now, Chair, been brought to our attention as members of this committee within the formal parameters of this meeting today. Now, I wouldn't particularly like to think where that leaves us in relation to our liability as elected members. Heaven forbid should anything untoward occur or go wrong. And forgive me for being perhaps putting that a bit negatively, but the blunt fact of the matter, Chair, is that I am not prepared to walk out here today and see us having failed to address this in the meaningful and radical fashion that we need to do. And I think that that's absolutely imperative that we do exactly that. As always, I will be guided by the views of colleagues, and particularly certain colleagues who have, you know, who come from that particular background. I would be particularly interested to hear their take on it. But as I say, I find it, Chair, without being disrespectful to anyone, fundamentally unacceptable that we have this before us today. And I'm not prepared to as I say, to walk out here without, you know, the total assurance that this is fully, or is going to be fully and properly addressed as of today.
Thank you, Councillor Geddes. Before I bring in Archie, would you like to make any comment to that remark?
I could perhaps do a suggestion that for reassurance to members, for perhaps at the next Joint Safety Committee, to get the senior manager to come along and give assurance of what actions is being taken to address the building safety action plan and policy and guidance.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Councillor Driver?
I agree with everything Alistair actually says. We can't leave this room without having some form of action placed upon the director, and then I think there's an issue here about leadership as well. We want to be seen as leaders in the health and safety environment, as well as directors, officers and line managers. I think it would be appropriate to have an action from this particular committee on that particular area, and if it's through the health and safety committee that we can do that, then you know that would be a good way forward. But I think we have to put behind that our concern of that these matters not being addressed as effectively as it could be.
And maybe as a committee we would look to send something to the parent committee about this as well. I think it's very important. Service committees should be aware of our opinions on this particular issue. Can I bring Councillor Collins in, and then I want to bring Derek in?
Yeah, I would just agree with the previous comments. Thanks, Chair. I note the difficulties that have been experienced in terms of personnel loss. But when I make reference to 3.14, for example, and the fire safety arrangements at 3 social work services offices, there have been no radical changes, is my understanding, of fire safety measures in recent times. So I would suggest, and I suspect, that these are historical. And again, it highlights for me the concerns that other members have spoken of in respect of the performance at property and architectural services and where they're at. So I'm not clear, Chair, when you say that we should make reference to the parent committee, because every committee has responsibility across the piece. So I think we need to be very directed at how we take forward any actions coming off the back of this, because ultimately, and as Alistair's already stated, the buck stops with this committee and whether we're performing our responsibility in these regards, whether it be policy and resources or full council. I don't think there's a specific parent committee. I think all parent committees have that responsibility, so I don't quite know how we handle that, but we need to have a clear steer before we go out of this room today in that regard, and how these matters are going to be addressed in the business taken forward.
I wish to bring Derek in slightly just now, unless... Oh, sorry, David.
Just to say, I mean, we are working very closely with the senior manager in property and architectural services, and you're right. There have been historically problems which we're trying to clear. Sue's already alluded to the fact that we've been down a member of staff as well, which we're pleased we now have a member of staff. Would it be a way forward if we actually undertook to reprogram our own work and make sure that we have an officer maybe who can support Louise and perhaps help her over maybe the wee capacity problems she has at the moment?
I think I'm going to bring Derek in here, but I do think it's maybe a bigger issue than that. But Derek, I'd like to hear your comments.
Firstly, certainly acknowledge the concerns of members, and they're well founded. So that's the first thing to say from the outset. I certainly confirm with members when this was brought to the Chief Executive's attention, the seriousness of it was not understated. I can assure all members of that, and I certainly understand, and maybe officers haven't been explicit, but I certainly understand in the last 5 weeks there has been progress in ensuring that the immediate actions have been taken in terms of this guidance and the appropriate steps taken. What's outstanding is certainly still prioritised with a view to that being done by the early in the new year at the very latest. So that's the timescale that we're looking at in terms of its priority. I think going forward, I would certainly be comfortable with this committee noting their concerns and therefore suggesting, in terms of Councillor Collins' point, that the parent committee, in terms of performance of Chief Exec Service, is the Policy and Resources Committee, and therefore they'll be due to receive an update on their business plan performance. So it is something that we could ask them specifically to look at as part of that performance report, and also that the comments from Health and Safety colleagues that we could also refer the matter to the Joint Safety Committee for an update presentation, following on from which the next committee meeting of this Audit and Risk Committee could receive a specific progress report on this item to give members the opportunity to scrutinise the action taken and to seek assurances that you're satisfied that the matter is now being addressed competently. Thank you, Chair.
I think there's a couple of members wanting back in, and there's a member who's still to speak, a couple of members still to speak, but I do think this is of such importance that we do need to make sure that this committee sends it to both Policy and Resources and I think the Health and Safety Committee, where we would expect feedback from both those committees as soon as possible. And that would be probably our first meeting within the new year. Councillor McKee, you wish to speak?
Aye, thanks, Chair. Just in the section Councillor Collins raised, it looks like social work and DG first are just on it. First on the requested property and architectural services. I think priority needs to be given to these requests, not just a case of all fit it in when we can. And in the next 315, we've had 2 breaches in different places. One's in a school, and that's not acceptable at all. So we're not just talking about one committee or one group of people. We're talking about the council as a whole. And for somebody to say, oh, the person that was doing health and safety has left, that's not acceptable. That should be passed on to somebody else to carry on with that work. There shouldn't be a break in that service at all, or that part of their work in that department. Health and safety should be a priority for everybody. And I think it needs to be not just pick on one group in a corporate building safety policy and guides. That's horrendous as well. But every group within this council needs to be told that we expect a priority to be given to health and safety.
I think
without argument.
I think you're quite right, and there's a process and procedure that should be followed, and it's very apparent from this that that's not happening, and we need to address that. Councillor Gilroy?
Can I just ask about stress analysis? It's at 3.10, and it says that 5 out of 6 departments have completed the task that planning and environment services have not. I just wonder what the reason for that was.
Two main reasons, because they're doing a departmental huge restructuring and structure review, and also again resource-wise the health and safety assistant had left and there was a period of time of a vacancy. They have now got somebody in place that needs to be trained up in that role, but again it's basically a succession planning aspect that we basically need to have further review at, to be honest with you, across the departments within education as well as within any officers that are leaving really across the council, particularly EVR.
I would like to add that we are restructuring across the council, but the restructuring review and restructuring across the council should not compromise health and safety in anywhere on this council. This isn't directed at yourselves, but I think that as a group here and as a committee, we need to make sure that people understand that. Collins.
Thanks, Chair. Just referring back to Councillor McKee's point at 3.15, as an audit and risk committee, can I suggest that in the event of breaches having taken place or being highlighted by HSE, that you as chair should be immediately advised of those breaches and given the option of calling a special meeting if necessary of this committee. But we need to have that level of measure and thumb on the pulse, if you like, of what's actually going on when it happens, as opposed to being historical reports. This has happened and this action has been taken. I think our responsibility, and I know we're going to have a seminar later on where we could cover that further, but I think that's worth noting at this point in time, reference 315.
I think that's something that we'll come to when we go to the recommendations. Councillor Geddes, did you want back in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I have no problems, let me make it clear, Chair, with what's being suggested as the way forward, sort of Health and Safety Committee and Policy and Resources. But what I would like as assurance on, Chair, is that if need be, we will have a special meeting of this committee to ensure, in fact, that we have the relevant report, and the progress has been taken, and that we have the assurance as the Audit and Risk Management Committee that in fact is taking place. I think that's how seriously I personally feel that we've got to view this. So by all means, let's proceed as accords, as has been suggested, but let's have a special meeting of this committee, to monitor just exactly how this has been taken forward and what's been done.
Thank you. We'll come back to that in the recommendations as well. Councillor Scobie?
Yeah, Chair, 2 points. One's on the 3.15, and we've all got corporate responsibilities. Yes. I would start off by saying that. But we don't know exactly what's going on out in the field. And only within the last couple of weeks, I attended a parent council meeting where the head teacher was reporting terrible smells coming from, I think she said the toilet, but I could be wrong on this one. It's no where it was coming from, but someone was called in, and this was making the staff feel dizzy and almost fainting. And then we had children, and yet there didn't seem to be the response that was required. Now, if anything untowards had happened to a child or a member of staff, then we have got that corporate responsibility. So it's really looking at this in terms of the audit and risk assessment. And if I then flip to what Patsy has referred to in stress analysis, and I've raised this, I don't know how many times, and we've raised it at joint safety committees and through the service committees. And what we tend to do is monitor those that are off and how long it takes for them to return. But in particular, in my concern is in social work, where they're running at full complement, but not full capacity. And it's the ones who are left to pick up the strands of some of the children who may be at risk. And if something untoward happens because of stress and how people are working well above 100%, then we equally have got a serious concerns in terms of stress analysis. So it's the ones that are going off and the ones that are left are still working under severe stress, in my opinion. And we are not seeing the service delivered the way that it should, and the service user suffer as a result, in my opinion. So it's all, what we do see and what we don't see that would concern me in this respect of stress analysis of those going off and those that are remaining that have got to pick up the tab and still run with the cases.
Okay, thank you for that. Do you want to make any comment?
I appreciate, to be honest, everyone's support and commitment actually on this report. On your first particular case, I couldn't obviously comment on an individual score, but perhaps I could speak to you outside on that. As far as corporately on stress and the health and wellbeing policy, on the stress within the council, it is, again, I think, well recognised that it is a potential issue with people leaving and the impact that has. Within human resources, they are reviewing at the moment the mental health at work pooling policy to look at not just the fact of when they go off, but to try and avoid those stresses in the first place and reduce, not if they're going to avoid it, but to try and reduce and manage them. And they are looking at and are supporting them, as well as the health and wellbeing unit, to actually do a joint corporate initiative involving department nominations from departments and the unions to try and to work this together to try and to take a more a holistic approach, if you like, to the issues that we have in the council to work together on these issues. Also, before you today is the corporate action plan for health and safety. However, there's other tiers that each department have a departmental health and safety plan, and the services also have their own service health and safety plans, and there's an increased accountability now for each of those departments and services to implement the results of the stress action plans. So yes, we've had the analysis undertaken, but what are they doing about the actions? That's actually been held to account, and equally they have to report back to the service committees on whether actions have been taken in a department and also on through the departmental management groups as far as whether the actions have actually been taken. And so there is that tracker now that wasn't there before. Thank you. Do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Chair, and I've heard Sue referring to this through the HR department, and that we're looking at the action plan. The action plan is a continual. You know, we can come up with an action plan, and you've got to keep looking at it and working at it, and people have got to recognise and observe it. But, you know, it's when do we reach the time when HR's coming back to report to us to say, right, we've got this, it's up and running, the trade unions are signed up to it, and all the rest. And running in parallel with that is, and we're all sitting here knowing just how many millions we've got to take out of the budget. And we're at we've trimmed all the fat, whatever fat there was there, and we're right at the bone now, and perhaps taken out, you know, hopefully not through compulsory redundancy, but nevertheless, it's people who are being taken out. And when is it, you know, it could reach the point where some child dies or something, and God forbid. But that's the kind of fear that people are working under. And we as a committee and as a council, in my opinion, we should be starting to recognise this, and whether we can take out any more and still feel safe within the council and the people we employ.
Well, we will come to the recommendations, and when we come to the recommendations, we will look at stress analysis as well. Councillor Gallagher.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I like it when people talk about accountability and responsibility and making sure that they're, you know, they are responsible for what they actually do. The accountability, the buck stops at the chief exec at the end of the day. We as a committee have got responsibility to ensure those accountabilities are in place, and quite rightly so, we're challenging the report and some of the issues within it. Coming just back to what the school that Willie was talking about, the head teacher had a right to take people out of that school if he felt it was, and he or she never did it. I don't know who it was, Willie. So, but it comes back to educating the educators. You know, do they understand their responsibilities or accountabilities with regards health and safety? And I spoke to Claire Renton on Monday at the group meeting about making sure that health and safety was, you know, within head teachers was something they understood. Because at the moment it is the head teachers, but there is a review going on across all the services across full council, and it's important that they understand their responsibilities under those pieces of legislation. And likewise, we didn't want to be operationally getting involved with day-to-day issues across the council, but quite rightly so, we have said that we want to make sure that the systems, the processes in place are right and sufficient for the job that we are asked to do. So I think when we come to the recommendation, there is to be something in there that supports that and supports the health and safety officers in making sure that those go forward. Because at the end of the day, this is a report about the whole council, not just their particular section. And they're the... I was trying to think of a word earlier on about what they are. They're the sort of people that push at the back of those people with responsible tasks regarding health and safety. So I think when we come to the recommendation, we do support our officers pushing those recommendations forward.
Thank you. No other members wishing to speak? Oh, sorry, Councillor Collins.
Thanks, Chair. I heard earlier the statement made that it was recognised that there are potentials for stress. I think every member is aware that there is stress out there in various degrees, and examples I'm sure could be brought forward by each and every member. And we do recognise that there is a high level of stress amongst our workforce. Now, again, part of the process is that they can commit on paper the fact that they're suffering from stress and some actions will be taken. But of course, members, employees of the council are reluctant to do that. They don't want to see it on the record and so on and so forth. Recently, I had occasion to have upgraded the need for training of officers to do return to work interviews because it was not seen as a high priority. It was upgraded as a result of that report, but I think the report, as it was presented to members, was indicative of a lack of understanding of the degree to which the problem exists and the negative impact it can have in this council, and we have a duty of care for the people who work for this council. There was also an incidence of return to work interviews being carried out in the back of a van by a senior officer who was not trained in that aspect. Now, I don't know where human resources come into play in this regard in supporting managers and others who have these responsibilities at the sharp end, as it were. And I would like some clarity around just what support there is available for officers in those circumstances, in dealing and hopefully helping and assisting people to work at their optimum and be not just physically healthy but mentally as well.
Okay, Derek, could you answer that, please?
Certainly in terms of the stress, can update members that this was an issue that was given a considerable discussion at a Policy and Resources Committee just around the summer time, and there was a commitment made that all service committees would indeed receive specific reports on the action plans in place within each service to deal with stress in a positive way, both for those staff that were unfortunately off with stress, as well as those that were possibly then having to deal with the absences. So there's clearly a lot of work going on within services and through health and safety team and HR colleagues, and members should start to see these progress reports that will set out the various support arrangements, including return to work interviews, all coming to service committees in the new year. So I can certainly assure members it's on the agenda and it's been taken seriously on that basis since it arose at P&R, as I say, around the summertime.
Have you got anything you want to add to that, Sue?
Just the last Joint Safety Committee, Human Resources was going to give a presentation to give an update for what they're doing about mental health policy and updating that. So that's been rolled forward for the next Joint Safety Committee. So just to let you know that you'll be given an up-to-date presentation at that.
Okay. Is it on this particular?
Oh, it's somebody else, yeah.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. It's widely recognised that workplace representatives have a marked improvement on health and safety performance. And I was actually wondering if we had any information on the number of workplace representatives we had and whether in fact we have sufficient numbers. And I was wondering if this information isn't available just now, if it could be made available at a future committee.
Thank you, Sue.
Happy to provide that at the Joint Safety Committee that's held each quarter. The unions do actually chair a Joint Safety Committee, with some of the members from this committee, elected members, attend. But we could seek definite numbers for you and ask them to perhaps respond back through to the Joint Safety Committee on that. Okay.
I think that would be useful information for the committee, so if you could feed it back, that would be helpful. Archie?
Yeah, so coming back to Appendix 2 and the last page 21 of the secretary, it's something that's actually in CD 5.1, which is lead by example, and it says elected members, chief exec and director of safety to actively seek sample demonstration of safety compliance during planned service, council premise visits and reinforced recognition of safe practice. And at the back it says not due to start. I would suggest we shouldn't have finished in the first place. It should be an ongoing thing. And I think perhaps one of the areas where we can lead by example is that there's an opportunity next week, for instance, where members have been asked to go to DG First and look at the winter maintenance side of things. And perhaps there's an opportunity for members in this committee to ask about the safety standards that are expected during that particular operation. Again, it raises the sort of leadership profile of not only officers within there, but members asking the question, want to look after the welfare of the staff as well. So perhaps that one should be not due to finish, rather it's not due to start.
Just on the same subject, when I used to work 30 years ago, there was a nominated representative in every workplace who done the health and safety. They go around the premises at least once a month, checking for health and safety issues, and obviously that was his responsibility all the time. And this, surely that's what should be happening here. And this is the part that I feel trade unions should be playing. They should be ensuring that their members are trained in health and safety and participating in workplace inspections at least monthly. And I think that's something that we need to push as well, if that's what this is talking about.
Do you want to make a comment on that?
Yeah, sure. The Health and Safety Executive, as part of good health and safety management, starts quite rightly elected members through senior management by leading by example. So as part of the plan, at every level, we have said, and as you'll see us here, elected members, and this was in the original plan as well as this refreshed one, right from elected members right through down to supervisors of demonstrating commitment by leading by example. And quite rightly, Councillor Dreyfus, right, it's something we should be doing anyway. It's best practice. The reason I've got no due to start, because we're perhaps not measuring that we're actually doing it. I can't say there actually, are we actually complying or not on that one, to actually quantify and demonstrate, to say, to reinforce that, are we actually doing that? And it is a matter that I would like further debate really with the new strategic lead of health and safety and perhaps the chair on perhaps that we can perhaps support you in that role. So, and I didn't feel it was something that I could give comment on, and that's why I've said they're not due to start. We haven't started measuring it really yet, if you like, and perhaps supporting. We have got elected member training rearranged now for January of this year, and that is something that we've certainly included within that training to give guidance, support, and to look at how practically that we can support you on that, and that's why.
Thank you for that. Okay, can we move to the recommendations?
Sorry, Chair. Just finally, page 24 of 36, I notice the list of training from DG First in terms of asbestos awareness, fire extinguishers, fire risk assessment, emergency first aid at work and so on. And I'm puzzled at the rollout of the Heart Start programme across the region and how we as a council extol the virtues and support that programme. But there doesn't seem to me to be any consideration of those aspects within council properties, whether they be customer facing or employee only offices. I point this out because it's highlighted for me in the list of training that's done and the shortcomings of the council with that specific regard. I don't know if it's appropriate to highlight it here, but I think it is appropriate as a consideration for this council to have a policy on that.
Okay. Sue, do you want to make a comment on that?
Yeah, sure. For the community groups, I know organisations like the British Heart Foundation and that get funding for supporting the communities. Within our own employees, there has been a meeting of departments and discussions with the Health and Wellbeing Unit and departments regarding the provision of defibrillators. And again, if we did do that, then there would be a consideration as well with the training that goes with that for our own employees. For the community, it's outside my scope because I can only got jurisdiction within council staff, but it is recognised as an important aspect, and it is something I think that the NHS as well. There's a lot of work that can be done there, and is being started actually to progress. But this training here is more for purely for staff training rather than the community side of things.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thanks for that, but I do believe that it's something we may point out to Policy and Resources, for example, to give consideration to in terms of protecting both members of the public visiting council offices and for the workforce of the council as well in all our buildings.
Yeah, can I come back on that? Because obviously, we have a first aid trainer, and I've been delivering first aid training to community groups right across Annandale and Estill for the last several years. At a cut price, I have to say as well. But I think Sue, from her perspective, is right. There's a legal obligation within the council, but I think Brian's absolutely right. There's a moral obligation that if people use our premises, at least we have an opportunity, you know, to support people who may be in some form of first aid problem. And I think a policy on where do we have defibrillators, that type of thing, is fine for our staff, but it's also an opportunity where people use libraries, customer service centres, that type of thing, where we may have those pieces of equipment. And I think it'd be right to have policy and resources to discuss that and see if there is a way forward.
We'll bring that into the recommendations as well. So could we move to the recommendations now, please? On 2.1, review the overall summary of performance of corporate health and safety action plan. We've done that.
Yes.
2.2, we've scrutinised the exception reports at Appendix 3, and we want to make the following recommendations under 2.3. So could you go through what?
Firstly, the Chair will be immediately advised to Chair of the Audit and Risk Management Committee will immediately be advised of any breaches of health and safety. Secondly,
can I just expand on that a bit? It's advised of serious breaches, because there will be minor accidents that happen all the time in places like DG First.
Enforcement authority.
Yes.
Advised where we have an enforcement authority have been rather than
And do we want to add in there that if deemed appropriate, then we would call an audit and risk committee meeting?
So that'll be operationally picked up.
Okay.
It's not a problem.
okay. There will be a special meeting of the Audit and Risk Committee to address the issues in relation to the Health and Safety Progress Report. We will then, thirdly, matters, concerns referred in the Health and Safety Progress Report will be addressed to the Health and Safety Committee and to the Policy and Resources Committee, and feedback will be provided from those committees.
I think it's important, though, as a committee, that we actually put a marker down and we address the issues that we've raised today via both Policy and Resources and Health and Safety committees, and we would expect feedback from both of those committees to our next Audit and Risk Committee. I think it's appropriate because of the seriousness, and if we're talking about restructuring being part of the cause of the breaches in health and safety, we need to make sure that that does not happen.
Yeah, I think Derek summed it up nicely before, and I think if he talks to Lucy about putting that into the recommendations, we can agree with that and move forward that way.
I think the ethos, Chair, was that this committee has clearly indicated that there requires to be a reaffirmation of the Council's commitment to all levels to a positive health and safety culture, and I can assure members that message will be relayed following the meeting today. They can have my assurance on that.
Okay. Members, are you comfortable with that?
Yep. Thanks, Chair.
And we do expect feedback. So. Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you. So we're moving on to item 5, which is the annual complaints monitoring report.
Morning.
We've got a report in front of us. Have you got anything further you wish to add to the report that we'll review today?
No, as the item previous, just happy to answer any questions members may have.
Okay, Councillor Bell?
Thanks, Chair. Obviously, looking at 3.3, you know, obviously we've had some very, very bad press in the paper recently about the complaints are steadily rising throughout Dumfries and Galloway. There are 219 from 2011 to 2012, like 431. This actually does concern me. Obviously, members of the public are actually making complaints about council services and that. It does concern me. We need to readdress this pretty dramatically. As you know, in various sectors there have been rising over the last year or two, but not just about complaints from the general public. What about complaints for elected members? Because elected members have got complaints to raise about the council, and we're denied any hearing other than through an EMS inquiry system. So I'm just wondering how this process should be taken on for elected members as well, because there's certainly some elected members have got complaints about the council and the door's just shut.
Before you make comment on that, I would just like to remind Councillor Bell that that was discussed at our last committee, and all leaders of all groups were sent, I believe, a briefing on exactly what the process was for members, and I'll bring in Derek so that you can actually address your point.
Thanks, Chairman. This was an issue that I believe was initially raised at Scrutiny and Performance Committee, and then was also raised at the ad hoc review of schemes, and then subsequently, as the Chair says, it was actually a discussion point in our last meeting, and it was minuted accordingly. I can reaffirm with members that the guidance note has been prepared on a number of ways in which members can exercise their right to raise concerns about the council, and there was an extensive list contained within that briefing note. But to ensure that members had the chance to comment further, that's been sent to all group leaders in the last few weeks, with the opportunity being afforded for the group to invite myself to come along and discuss it at their group meeting. And certainly specifically in the case of the Conservative group within Councillor Bell's domain, I can affirm that I have spoken to Councillor Cuthers just in the last couple of weeks on this matter, and I would anticipate an invitation to attend in due course. But I'm sure we can continue that discussion.
I'm sure we're delighted to attend.
Indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it on the same point, Councillor
Yeah,
Davidson?
yes, Chair, it is indeed. That's helpful to have Mr. Crichton's response to the point that Graham has raised. I mean, I think, well, speak for myself and a number of colleagues and the SNP group. I think there's a very real appreciation that, you know, the situation that we have at the moment is far from ideal. And while it is helpful, you know, to have an aid memoir, for want of a better term, showing just exactly what the various paths and approaches are or can be, I also feel, Chair, that the opportunity should be taken to conduct something much more radical than that, refocus it and make it more direct and better suited, as it were, to elected members pursuing you know, genuine and legitimate complaints that they have in relation to the functioning and the activities of the council. So I would hope, as I say, that you know, the process, or the outcome from the process will be a radical review, as it were, to make sure, in fact, that we can sharpen the focus and we can finish up with a better situation than we manifestly, some of us would say, have at the current moment in time.
Well, we did discuss it at the last meeting, and I know
Yeah,
that's the
appreciate that.
process. So moving on, I believe Councillor Bell did actually ask a question to do with the increase in the number of complaints, and I think it's very apparent that there has been quite a huge increase in the number of complaints, and maybe you would like to address that point. On the back of his question, I would like to know where we are. Have we benchmarked ourselves against other councils in Scotland, and where are we in line with those councils? So if you
Chair,
could...
maybe possibly a breakdown of figures. Obviously, I believe a lot of these complaints that were made from obviously curbside collections in the west, so obviously there could be high numbers down to curbside collections in the west. So I think if it was broken down into area committees, and then we can find out which area is actually doing the more complaining. It gives an indication, the picture, as we go to Nestill area committee, and we actually get a report on police and fire with crimes within Nestill and crimes within the crimes within Shrewsbury or various fire events within the Shrewsbury. So we've all got all elected members need to know which areas are performing or underperforming.
Yes, I agree with that. Could you answer his question, please?
Yeah, if I can just start, I just very briefly want to address the elected member complaints, if that's okay. Just to clarify the role of my unit and the purpose of this report. I work within the Information Management and Complaints unit, and our role is to make sure that the council undertakes their statutory duties in terms of the complaints handling procedure. That complaints handling procedure is outlined by the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman, and there's legislation that underpins that. And that legislation talks about complaints from members of the public. So whilst I absolutely respect your right to raise complaints, and I agree that there should be mechanisms for that, that's not currently the role of the unit, and it's not currently the purpose of this report. So just to clarify that point there. In terms of addressing the rise in complaints, yes, complaints have risen and they have doubled since 2011-12. There's a couple of reasons for that, possibly three actually. First of all, I would say is the increase in awareness about complaints handling, both locally and nationally. As you may be aware, the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman produced a model complaints handling procedure recently, which all local authorities were required to adopt. As of the beginning of last year, we adopted it from the 1st of April. There was a lot of publicity around that, and there was requirements for us as a local authority to make sure that we better publicised our complaints handling procedure and made it much easier for people to raise complaints. The Ombudsman clarified and set out in their recent annual report again that they expect local authorities to see an increase in complaints as a result of that. I don't think that these are sort of new complaints as such. I think they're complaints that perhaps weren't coming into the procedure previously or weren't being captured. In addition, we also have much better processes and procedures locally too. People are aware of the complaints handling procedure in terms of staff. They know that things have to be recorded. We have a database which allows us to produce these reports. So I think our own processes are better. Going back to 2011-12, the complaints unit as it was then was formed about 3-4 years ago, and prior to that we only really captured and recorded complaints for social work services. We didn't really formally capture and report on complaints for other services, which we are now doing. So I think that that's reflected in the figures when you see that there's a reasonable rise in the amount of complaints that we're reporting on for community and customer services, for example, but the number of complaints year on year for social work services is staying quite steady, and they no longer receive the most complaints across the council. So that is in relation to the rise in complaints. In terms of benchmarking is something that I'm absolutely keen to do. We've not been able to do it historically because prior to the new model complaints handling procedure coming in, 32 local authorities dealt with complaints in 32 different ways, so we weren't able to compare. We're now all working under the same procedure and recording against the same performance indicators. So there is work being done at national level to put us in a position where we will be able to benchmark in the near future. That information isn't readily available just now. I have done some sort of cursory checks and looked at some other local authorities to see how we compare in terms of numbers of complaints. East Renfrewshire is the authority that has the most information readily available just now, and they had 3 or 4 times the number of complaints that we had. But I don't know if that's comparable, because if you know about family groups and things, as you know, they may have more residents, they might, you know, deliver more social work services, which would typically attract more complaints. So we need to sort of be conscious of that. So that's something that I would hope to bring to members in next year's annual report and provide a comprehensive breakdown of benchmarking.
And on the subject of actually knowing in which departments have the most complaints, I think Councillor Bell looked in particular about a breakdown and maybe some of that being reported to the area committees. I think it would be useful if we could have a breakdown that was reported, because I think that would help members as well. So if we could make sure.
All that information is captured on, we have a database called Respond where we capture all our complaints, or certainly we should be capturing all our complaints as a council, and that has quite powerful reporting capabilities, so it's very easy to pull that information from there, so we can do that. Just to kind of link into the mention of curbside collections and things, there are sometimes kind of hot topics across the region which could be perceived to be attracting a lot of complaints, but depending on the nature of them, they may not be coming into the complaints handling procedure. We are encouraging, and increasingly so, services to try and resolve matters at the first point of contact and at operational level to avoid customers having to go through that procedure if we can just do it there and then and fix it. And certainly we haven't in the complaints unit seen a lot of complaints come through the formal process in terms of curbside collection. So I can't comment on whether that reflects positively on how the service are dealing with it, but certainly it's not something that we've seen a spike in.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Bell, do you wish to come back?
Yes, I do actually. Obviously, you're talking about a number of complaints and whatnot and services across the region. That I know at various other public sectors have got what they call complaints boards. Complaints boards, you get an actual member of public can make a complaint to. But why is the council obviously have a complaints monitoring board within the council? A lot of other companies within Scotland or public sector bodies, they work with independent complaints boards. If someone's got to make a complaint, as I've made a complaint to the NHS about an issue a long time ago, I'm not saying what it's about, but it was more or less the tin lid was putting it after a period of time. It wasn't a satisfactory answer. But I think sometimes very, very sensitive information that could be to do with social services or education, and sometimes people would rather go to an independent hearing. This is what concerns me in case there's some real serious complaints out there. I mean, I think sometimes we should be actually handling these independently away from the council, from the long arm of the council.
Could you explain to Councillor Bell the process for complaints and how you would get to that stage?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Our complaints handling procedure, as I referred previously, is dictated by the Ombudsman, and really we have almost no scope to amend that. So the general complaints handling procedure for all services other than social work, and I'll come back to that in a moment, is we have a two-stage procedure. Stage 1 is about local resolution, so the team that's being complained about would respond, and stage 2 involves an investigation and a response from a responsible manager. Now, it's important that services in the council has the opportunity to respond, the right to reply to those complaints. In terms of external scrutiny, the final stage is the Ombudsman, and they would do that scrutiny for us. Talking about an independent panel, social work services do have slightly different legislation that dictates that their complaints procedure should have a third stage, which we have been operating for many, many years now. And that is a complaints review panel. So if someone complains about social work services, if they're a service user and they're complaining about the service that they've received, they would go through stages 1 and 2 as previously mentioned, and then the third stage would be the panel, which involves a panel of laypersons. We have a complaints review panel support group. They're generally speaking ex-professionals that are trained in dealing with complaints. We would go along to the panel meeting, and social work services would be asked to present their case along with the complainants. Then the panel would set out recommendations, and those are presented to Social Work Services Committee along with a covering report from the service. And again, once that is concluded, those complaints would go on to the Ombudsman if they remain dissatisfied. We see very few social work services complaints progress to the Ombudsman. I've probably only seen 2 or 3 in the 4.5 years that I've been working in the unit, because that panel process works very well. However, that said, it's not something that we would have the freedom to implement for other services, because the Ombudsman is extremely prescriptive in how we deal with complaints.
Thank you for that. I have a number of members wishing to speak. So I have Councillor Gilroy, Councillor Collins, Councillor Scobie, Councillor Geddes, I think, did you indicate you wish to speak, and Councillor Dryborough. So in that order, so Councillor Gilroy.
Thank you. I mean, I actually don't think this is bad news. I mean, I know it's gone up, but there's reasons for that. And in the scheme of things, there's not an enormous number of complaints. What I am slightly more concerned with is at item 5 of the number of percentage of complaints that were page 30. 16% of complaints closed at stage 2 is not really good enough, and 33% at stage 2 and escalated compliant. And I just wonder, is the reason for that is that are they so complicated, or are you under resourced? Is it a staffing problem again, or why? Because the idea is that they should be finished within 20 working days, and they're not, clearly not. Quite often they're not. You're not being able to do that, and that is not good enough.
Firstly, I would say that I absolutely agree that our performance against timescales is not good enough, and that's something that we recognise both within the unit and as a wider council. There's a few things that have impacted on that. If you look at the bottom figure under number 5, that is all the stage 2 complaints pulled together. So our performance is 33% in terms of responding within timescales to those escalated complaints at stage 2. A couple of years prior to this, our compliance, our performance was 12%, which obviously is not good enough. So we have seen improvements. We're sitting at about 37% at the moment. So again, we're continuing to improve. Things that have impacted on that, the model complaints handling procedure, when we implemented it from the 1st of April, had much stricter timescales for the council. Previously, we had 10 working days to respond to a stage 1 complaint. That's been reduced to 5 working days. And we had 25 working days to respond to a stage 2, which is now been tightened up and is 20 working days. And without going into the detail, because I don't think it's relevant, but there has also been a change in how we calculate those working days, which has seen us lose a further day off each stage. So that had an impact. The reason for that, Councillor Gilroy, is that we used to record the first working days, the first full working day. So if something came in at 4 o'clock this afternoon, tomorrow would be day 1. The Ombudsman says that they no longer want us to do that, and if it comes in at 4 o'clock today is day 1. Which you can see the impact that could have on us, because there can be very little you can do within that hour sometimes. Okay, so that's where we're at. So that had an impact on us. The tightened up timescales was very difficult for us. And also the complexity of stage 2 complaints, absolutely, and particularly when it comes to the likes of social work services, where you can imagine that we're having to delve into very complex and sensitive matters. We like to take the approach of meeting with the complainant under stage 2, not myself or my unit, but we encourage services to do that, to discuss their complaint, to hear their side of the story whilst we do the investigation work. And again, making those arrangements to meet, to go through that can all take time. That said, we need to be doing better, and I'm confident that we can and will be doing better in the very near future. We've looked at our arrangements across the council in terms of how we deal with the administration of complaints, how we get them to services, how services allocate those to investigating officers. We've implemented a huge amount of training through our unit. I've trained almost, I think, 200, maybe 250 staff this year in dealing with complaints, and that, I think, has directly impacted our performance and has seen some of the increases as a result of that. And we're implementing some other things in each service. We're implementing sort of dedicated staff, and in addition to their main role, who will be a key link for the complaints unit to make sure that we manage complaints better. So there is an action plan in place to improve it. It's not good enough at the moment, but I am confident that we will see improvements.
You know, I didn't know it was at 12% before, for instance, so we haven't got that in this report.
We brought an annual report to committee for the last 3 years, I think, and it did come to committee a couple of years ago, and as you can imagine, there was a lot of discussion about it at that time, and that's when, you know, we began our action plan, and we started to develop the bespoke training. We were working with services, we were doing all the things that we needed to do to improve. So whilst, you know, 37% where we're sitting at the moment isn't good enough, we've improved threefold, and I think that that is a success story, and we'll continue to build on that for next year.
I think it would be useful if in future reports you actually had that information there, so you can actually see that there has been progress. I think that would be helpful. Councillor Driver, you wanted to
It was
ask
the
a
same,
question
exactly the
on
same
this?
point, Chair. I mean, but we've got it within the body of report 2011-12, 12-13-13-14. I don't think it would be a big job to actually put that in the report as well, so we can actually see the improvement. Because similar to health and safety, is about continuous improvement at the end of the day. And if we don't get complaints in, we can't improve. And obviously the actions from those complaints to the various service committees and services themselves will improve that situation as well. So I won't require to come in next year.
You've had a long wait, but you're next.
Thanks, Chair. Just to say, or ask Emma the question around the stage 2, is there anyone from your department who actually sits in on those stage 2 meetings between department and complainant, for example? It seems to me that it would be an opportunity for the department to recognise and identify maybe inherent difficulties that the department itself is not recognising or addressing. So how else do we identify how the stage 2 process is being managed and that it's consistent across the council?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. We don't typically sit in on the meetings between the investigating officer and the complainant. A couple of reasons for that. Firstly, we don't have the capacity to do that. But secondly, the process really, the investigating officer, whilst they'll often be from the service, will be independent to the complaint. And we find that when they go out, it's about building a rapport with the complainant. Sometimes they have to do that, and whilst it is a formal process, sometimes it's best to do that in a sort of more informal way, depending on the preference of the complainant. We've certainly had comments in the past, if we've all went marching in with our suits on, for example, that people aren't comfortable with that. And that process does work very well. We've needed to improve how we deal with investigations so that we are getting that consistency. And I'm from a background in quality and quality standards and customer service, so it's certainly important to me. We have templates, we have guidance, we have rakes and rakes of documents to support investigating officers. But beyond that, we're now delivering this bespoke training that I designed and started delivering from the start of this year. And from the 1st of April next year, we're going to make that training mandatory for all officers responding to complaints. So you can't actually respond to a complaint unless you've been through the training. The feedback we've had on the training, I'm pleased to say it has been excellent. The investigation training, for example, is 3 hours. I wanted it to be short. And I wanted it to be really sharp and to the point. I don't believe in this kind of death by PowerPoint, going out to the training unit for the day and leaving sort of feeling half asleep. So what we do is we work through a case study in the training unit where people actually get to look at an investigation, look at background documents and produce a report. And we also have a section in that training where we focus on interview skills. So how to get the best out of that conversation with the complainant. That said, if somebody indicated that they would like support from our unit in that meeting, then certainly we can do that. And we do become involved if there's a situation where we think mediation might be effective and we want to improve the relationship between the customers and the service. And we're involved in sort of dispute resolution, dealing with those complaints that are much more challenging, where there's maybe unacceptable actions and that kind of thing. So we do have face-to-face interactions in some cases.
Thank you for that. Councillor Scobie? Oh, sorry.
I thank Emma very much for that answer. I do feel, however, and I do recognise the resource implication to attend at every stage 2 occurrence, but don't you think that after a 3-hour training session, no matter how good it is, that it would be good to sample, if you like, some of what's happening purely and simply from an observer point of view, which might also help inform the training that's given, but also ensure, as it were, an audit of best practice is being exercised, and it wouldn't be so resource demanding, purely and simply to see that what you're training is being put into practice.
That might be something you could consider and feed back to this committee in the future. I think that might be something that might be helpful.
Just a couple of brief points on that. We do quality monitor investigation reports, so when the report is produced, we do ask that it comes to our unit in draft format, and that's compulsory actually, and we check that to make sure that it is a good quality report. And so we're doing that, and also in line with the Ombudsman's new performance indicators, Indicator 7 requires us to start measuring customer satisfaction with the complaints procedure and the complaints process, and that will include the investigation stage. But I think it is a very valid point and a useful suggestion that we could be doing that sort of face-to-face quality check as well, and it's something that absolutely I'd be willing to consider in the near future. However, there is the resource implication of that, and I would also mention as well that there's going to be some challenges to doing that next year in the team, as we're looking at retirement and maternity leave for some of the key staff as well. So you can guess which will fall to Judex and which will fall to me. I don't think that's difficult to figure out. But yeah, no, absolutely a valid point and a useful suggestion, Councillor. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, I'd like to preface this, and I think, at least for me, the department has definitely helped in terms of Judix, Emma, Devon, and all that have been involved in how they responded to elected members. But the chart on 3.3 highlights just how poor we were in the past. So I don't see the numbers increasing. All I see is that we're more open and transparent, and people are coming forward and feel confident in making the complaint. And I think it's that confidence that we've got to focus on, so that people feel that they can forward. And again, some of the statistics there, 83% number of complaints closed at stage 1. It is very high. Yes. in terms of 83%. But the reflection of that in terms of the ones that are upheld, are only 151 of the 392. So it'd be interesting to see just what kind of complaints there were and so forth and so on, because that's still a relatively low percentage. And from my experience in holding weekly surgeries, most people just want to come in and feel that they're being listened to with their complaint. Their complaint may not be that large, but they just wanted to feel that they're being listened to. The figure is still relatively low, because it highlights more, not so much the closure, but people just walking away for the complaint. And while you can record that in statistical detail, it's who else they talk to. And I think it was once described to me by a person who had a restaurant. You could sell 99 good meals and only take that one bad one to reflect just how poorly the council is. And statistics don't really mean anything. So in that respect, there's a lot of figures here, and it's to try and decipher what they actually mean. But coming back to the point being made by Councillor Bell on more than one occasion in terms of elected members, and Derek is well aware of it, but in my opinion, it's the information in terms of elected members and elected members receiving people coming through the door who 9 times out of 10 are dissatisfied with either the service they've received or they have issues. And it's the sharing of the information on that person's issues. And I hopefully, in the passing of time, this will be resolved in terms of what information can be shared. And I have had the assistance of Judix's department in terms of what can be shared, but it's clear in my mind from documents that I have provided to the departments that for an elected member, for me to do my casework, I do need the information that is held on file or on that individual, not hampered by data protection, although it is important. It's that we as elected members, or I as elected members, want to see that information, and I'm quite sure a number of these could be resolved much, much sooner. And we've had experience, and yourself has commented in terms of audit and risk, looking at the reputation of the council if indeed these issues are not resolved and not resolved timiously, because it goes from one complaint to another complaint to another complaint to another complaint. So that could be the complexity, at least as I have experienced, and then going for FOIs and you know, the other aspects that people have to apply for. So what I'm saying, I think it's very much on the point of what Archie said. It's about increased improvement, so that 430, while recognising the number of complaints over the years, it's how they've been resolved and what does the council learn from it at each of the stages, particularly at stage 1, to the satisfaction of the people that we are trying to serve. I think that's the most important, but also the sharing of information with the elected members to allow them to do their duties and casework.
Thank you, Councillor Scobie. Derek, do you want to make a comment on this?
No, just to indicate, as Councillor Scobie says, we're in discussions with the ICO at the present time, but certainly reassure all members that the Member Officer protocol sets out quite clearly the Council's requirements to provide information on request by members. But we'll pick that up under separate cover in due course. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scobie. I've got Councillor Geddes and then Councillor Dryborough.
Chair, I've got mine in.
All right. So you did. Sorry.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. Three brief points, if I may. Paragraph 3.3, and I don't want, under any circumstances, it to be construed that I'm trying to be being smug or complacent. I think the point made is a valid point. The complaint numbers are comparatively small in the context of the total volume of the interactions that council staff have with customers during the course of a year. I don't think we should lose sight of that. I think we've got to keep a degree and a sense of perspective on it. Having made the point, Chair, even one legitimate complaint and genuine complaint is one too many. So it's a balance that's got to be struck. That's the first point. Second point, Chair, as the page 30 item at box number 7, customer satisfaction with the complaint service provided. I would have to say I'm a bit surprised that we are not yet capturing this crucial information. That's the point I would make. And it goes on to say that there are plans in place to begin measuring satisfaction in line with the requirements of this indicator. I think that's absolutely imperative, Chair, and the approach we'll take is currently being developed. I would like to think, Chair, that there might be a locus and a role for elected members in determining what approach will ultimately be taken. And making the point, Chair, I'm not suggesting that we stray into the bounds of operational issues, but I think there's a genuine and a legitimate role for elected members in assisting in the formulation of that, the approach. And the last one, Chair, is box number 5 on page 31. We're talking about PES. All council services which receive the weekly planning lists will be reminded of the purpose and status of the list and their ability to request a formal consultation on any application on the list. Each service will be asked to nominate an officer to receive and be responsible for the list each week. Well, that's fine as far as it goes, but that to me is a bit passive, Chair, because I would have thought there are certain circumstances where, for instance, people, case officers, who are dealing with planning issues and particularly planning applications, would be insisting, in fact, on responses from council services, council departments, but also perhaps from external organisations where they feel that these responses are extremely fundamental and germane, as it were, to the determination of the application. And if they were doing that, Chair, maybe we would get to the situation where planning applications, wouldn't be refused on road safety grounds when the road safety people, i.e. the police, have never ever been consulted. I see at least one colleague here knows exactly what I mean in relation to the last meeting of the Planning Applications Committee. And it's no a case, Chair, of being bad losers. At the end of the day, we've got to ensure, in fact, that we have sufficient information to allow us to come to proper and safe decisions. So I would like to see that rather passive statement, beefed up, and some recognition at the end of the day of the case officer coming to a decision and saying, well, look, we've got to ensure in these particular circumstances that we get this consultation, we get this information. I think that's essential, Chair, and it's a serious point I'm making.
Thank you, Councillor Geddes. Can you make comment, please?
Yes, absolutely, Chair. If you don't mind, if you would allow me, I'd just like to briefly go back to the points that Councillor Scobie was making. I would like to thank you, Councillor Scobie, for highlighting that 83% of the complaints were resolved at stage 1. That's a good news story, and I'm keen for everybody to be aware of that. What that tells us is that when we are engaging with customers directly around their concerns, that we are able to resolve it, even if they're not upheld. And I am really promoting this approach, and there's going to be an increased focus on it next year going forward, that we should be much more focused on resolution. So asking customers, what is your desired outcome, and seeing if we can deliver that. And I'm also going to be encouraging services with the support of CMT and CBSG and senior management to have increased the amount of direct interaction with customers. I don't think that it's good enough that if someone puts in a complaint that we just bat off a letter in response to them. I think in the majority of cases we should try to speak to them either on the phone or face to face to discuss that, because in a lot of instances they do just want to have their sort of air their gripes. You can have that discussion, and when you have that open communication with them, you get a better understanding of where each party is coming from, and you agree a way forward. So I would like to see that these stage 1 response letters, if they do still need to go out, are more saying this is what we've discussed, this is what we've agreed, and we're working together with our customers rather than just batting out a letter because that's what the procedure says. So there's definitely a focus on that. So thank you. But I'd just also like to say as well that we do have some extremely challenging complainants, and I'm sure many of you around the room will have names popping into your head just now. And whilst I absolutely believe in ensuring that we afford the right to our customers, service users and residents of the region to raise concerns, we also have to manage those that are very challenging, and there has been a lot of learning on that in recent years, and I would also like to see us next year taking a much more robust approach to those that are just exhausting services, that are being persistent, and that there's no real benefit to either them or us for continuing that engagement. So the unacceptable actions policy came to members earlier in the year, and we are working on making sure that we've got all the procedures behind that to be able to do that better in the future, because at the moment a disproportionate amount of the time of my unit is spent on the very few, and I would rather be focusing on the many where we can make a difference. So that's the comments I wanted to make there. Councillor Geddes, just to come back to the points that you made, and again to thank you for them as well. In terms of customer satisfaction, I note your concerns. Just to clarify on that, we do measure satisfaction with the responses to the complaints. So whenever we issue a response to a complaint, we put in a satisfaction form with that to ask the customer if they're happy with the response or not, and if not, they have the opportunity to go on to the next stage. Even when our complaints procedure is exhausted, we still ask whether they're satisfied and whether they intend to go into the Ombudsman. That has benefits from an administrative point of view, but also allows us to measure how many are progressing or not. So we have been doing that for a number of years, so just to reassure you on that. The area that we are working on is the Ombudsman has placed a new requirement on local authorities, and we've only been aware of this for just under 12 months now, for us to measure customer satisfaction with the complaints procedure and really with the work of my unit, if you like. So how happy were they, like how easy was it to find out about the procedure, how easy to read was the leaflet, that kind of thing. Did we keep them posted on where the complaint was at and all that kind of stuff? And that's what the requirement is under point 7 in the report. We do that to an extent in that for a number of years now in their leaflet we ask how easily was it to read and how easy was it to understand, but we haven't done it in depth. And the reason that we need to take a wee bit more work on the approach to that is we obviously need to do it in a way that's sensitive to, if you're right in the middle of a really serious and intense social work complaint, do you want me writing to you and saying, you know, how happy are you with the leaflet or something? So we need to make sure that we do it at the right time. And I think what we're going to do is we'll do an exit survey. We probably won't approach all customers. We'll just take a dip sample within, say, 1 month of their complaint being concluded, and we'll send them a questionnaire, or we'll do it by phone if we can, just to see how happy they were with the service we provided. So just as a reassurance on that. And finally, your point on the learning and point 5, these learning points are owned by the services, so really it's difficult for me to comment on the specifics of that, but I can say that point 5 was as a result of comments from the Ombudsman in relation to a specific complaint. And what had happened was planning were sending out their weekly list to services, but it was identified by the Ombudsman that because it was sort of everybody's responsibility to check them, it was almost nobody's responsibility, and they wanted a named officer. But I take your point, and I absolutely agree that we need to make sure that these learning points are as succinct and detailed as possible so that we can put them to best use for the future.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that. Right, can we move to the recommendations, please? So we're going to approve the annual consent monitoring report for 2013-14. Members are happy with the recommendation? Yeah. Okay, thanks very much.
Just before we conclude, can I just thank you? I love it when I come along and you ask questions. It's good for me because I want you to be interested in what we're doing. And just before I leave, I would extend an invite to any one of you. If you want to come over to the unit, we're at 118 English Street at any point. Just give us a call. You're welcome to visit and learn a wee bit more about what we do, because we love we love what we do. We love complaints and we love making a difference. So we'll happily,
Pleased to see somebody happy.
On that basis, can I suggest we book a slot for Emma every month?
Thank you very much.
Okay, can we move on to item 6, the internal audit reports? Kevin, you're going to take us through these. So we just start with the first one, which is the council tax. Have you got anything further to add to the report that's in front of us?
Thank you. At a recent committee, I asked the question regarding whether the council tax register were examined in relation to services being requested. And it was advised yes. Now, I see nothing in here specifically, Kevin, that tells me who has access and how that information is shared. If I can give an example, if a household were to make application for their grass to be cut by the council as a service, is the council tax register checked to ensure that any claims of solely elderly, infirm, are living in that address, or that there might be people living at that address who could ably manage, so that what checks? I was assured that the council tax register was checked, and I wonder how that process, it doesn't seem to be covered in your paper, works. What access does DG First have, for example, to the council tax register in that relation?
I'm not sure I understand where Councillor Collins is coming from, but if you could answer this question, that would be helpful, but I'm not sure that it's actually to do with this financial report, but I think it's a legitimate question, so have you got an answer for him?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I do accept it's a legitimate question, and I understand why the council is asking it. However, I have to say I don't know. It doesn't feature in the audit because it's not something that we have taken into account, and the reason why I haven't taken it into account is because I would be surprised if what the councillor is describing was happening routinely. We have to look at data protection, use of information, etc. Certainly historically, the use of the council tax register is restricted for council tax purposes. The reason we keep information about people, where they live and who's in the property and their liability is all connected with raising a tax. And certainly going back 10 years, it was extremely frowned upon using a council tax database for almost any other purpose. We do have the electoral roll and the assessor, and very recently had occasion to discuss with the assessor use of some data in connection with something called the National Fraud Initiative, and he pointed out that the restrictions in connection with the electoral roll that apply to him mean that he cannot provide that information even for the purposes of National Fraud Initiative, that would break the regulations surrounding the assessor's position. So far as I know, there are still quite strong restrictions about the way that the council tax register can be used and the purpose to which it's put. So I would say it is not routinely used, even in connection with better customer services. It's not routinely used by services. But I will undertake to ask the same question the council asked, in particular in relation with DG First, and to establish, as far as I know, they don't have any access to it, but I will check that position and I'll try and understand why the councillor might have given that answer, which at the moment I would say does not coincide with my understanding of the position.
Clarification would be useful. Councillor Collins, do you want to come back?
Yes, please, Chair. For me, the question arises out of the content of the paper in relation to sharing data.
Yep.
And an answer that I asked at committee recently and was assured that the council tax register was checked for these purposes. So that's why I was seeking clarification on just what the situation is insofar as that data sharing is concerned and who has access. There's quite a number of people have access. There's quite a number of people who have previously had access that there is no register of, as it were. There are quite a number of people who, if they tried to log on 3 times and get locked out, there is no record of that being kept, and therefore do they still manage to get access or don't they? And I'm quite vague about what's said in the paper here in that regard. So it's a number of aspects that I feel are pertinent to the paper and very relevant across the service from this council.
Some further clarification would be useful for this committee. So if you could find out and feed back to the next committee meeting on this particular issue.
Happy to.
Thank you.
And we'll minute that too. We'll expect feedback. Thank you. Councillor Scobie, you're next.
Yeah, Chair, maybe it's questions directed to page 11, Kevin, and it's reference to payments other than direct debits, and no later than yesterday, and it's an ongoing saga. A person drew to my attention that the pay points, people who pay into a pay point, and I don't know much about it, so I'm seeking advice on this one, whether maybe an anomaly. But given that we have moved away from direct collection points in the main, and we're trying to push people to post offices, direct debits in the main, or other means of paying, then someone who pays into a pay point on the first of the month as to the date that they're required to pay their council tax, that pay point may take anything up to 3 to 5 days to arrive at the council's point, i.e. the finance department. They are in receipt of payment on the first of the month, but they then, that triggers a letter of being in arrears. If that happens twice, it is then referred to the sheriff's officers or debt collectors, whatever one you want to refer to. But do we make it explicit? The same could be said of a cheque. Someone walking into the council offices here in Dumfries, handing over a cheque on the day to pay, then is that then recorded as being paid when that cheque could take 5 days to clear? And it's the issue of, do we make it clear in our process that anyone who pays other than direct debit through the pay points or whatever, then they must give 5 days prior to the first of the month, so that they are not then triggered by a letter of being in arrears.
Kevin, can you answer that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I regret to say I don't agree with the councillor's assertion about the problem being that extent. Council tax are very diligent indeed when they come to recovery runs in making sure that as much information is taken into account as possible before reminder letters are sent out, and certainly before references are sent to sheriff officers. They're extremely diligent to make sure they've captured all of the information about recent payments. We have seen, and it's described in this report, the process where in preparing for a summary warrant, for instance, right up until the last minute, information is taken into account and stops are put on that information going forward and being included in the sheriff's summary warrant. So I'm afraid I do not accept the contention that a member of the public who is diligent in terms of making their payments to council tax, they pay them in accordance with the instalment plan that's arranged, are going to wind up on a warrant before the sheriff officer through accident or through the payment being in process. In 99% of cases that I know about, if there is a difficulty, the customer is encouraged to contact council tax section. But in any case, if any council taxpayer has got a receipt to show they've made a payment, and any contact is made with them, that information is recorded and it's checked back to make sure that we know that the payment's been received. Now, so I'm afraid I do not accept the contention that a customer can find themselves in the position of being up on a warrant because their cheque was delayed for clearance for 5 days. I just don't accept that at all. If the council's got specific instances he'd like me to look at, I would be delighted to do that. You give me that information and I will demonstrate to you that it does not happen.
I think Councillor Scobie was asking a question as to whether or not in the procedures or process that we lay out as a council, if somebody was to pay at a pay point, do they understand that it might be 5 days before that's cleared and shows in the account in the council that we've paid the council tax?
Again, Chair, I'm sorry, I can't speak to that delay. I do know we used to have difficulties with the gyrobank system that customers who paid through to post offices, the post office tended to hang on to that money a little longer than we would have liked, and it came through, but that was accommodated for and made allowance for in any collection and recovery arrangements. We knew about that. So with pay points, we've moved to pay points, and as far as I know, the pay point process, it's never been discussed with me there's a 5 or 6 day delay on it. But again, I'm quite happy to look into that and report back to members. So I can't confirm or deny that it takes 5 days, but I would be surprised. The reason we've moved to pay points is to improve customer service and to improve efficiency of the council. So it doesn't seem likely to me that we've got a 5 day delay between making a payment and the council receiving it. In any case, the council taxpayer is not disadvantaged by using the pay point system. Clearly, it would be daft for us to set up a system and then actually penalise them for using that system that we want them to use.
Thank you, Councillor Scobie.
Thank you, Chair, for summarising what my question was, because I didn't get it answered in terms of the process and whether people, council taxpayers, are made aware of the process that you need to be making the payments 5 days before, or whatever the period is, before the 1st of the month, is what I said. Not that I think I was making that big an assertion in terms of the sheriff's officers and so forth, and letters of demand that follow if it's not received on the 1st of the month, as recorded on the 1st of the month. And then we hear from Kevin, as far as he knows. My question was in relation to that, and I want to know.
Well, I think what we've got here, Councillor Scobie, is the fact that Kevin Geraghty has said he will feed back to this committee to answer to your question.
Please.
So if we could just get an answer to that question, that would be helpful. Thank you.
The question be that the process makes it from people who do not pay by direct debit.
If there's a delay in the process and a delay in it being recorded, we would like to know whether or not there is a delay.
That's in the process.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else got any further questions on this, Councillor Geraghty?
Well, it's maybe a comment rather than a question, Chair, and I make it with a certain degree of reluctance, because I wouldn't want to create the impression that I'm being disrespectful or less than fair to Kevin for what are extremely detailed reports. Can I say, first of all, though, that I am delighted to see that this item, standing item on the agenda, if the current meeting papers are anything to go by, hopefully we'll now be focusing on high-level issues from now on, and that's not meant to be unkind, to ex-Academy's tuck shop account, but I think in the past we've tended, as it were, to focus on issues like that. And as I say, that's not meant, let me make that clear, Chair, that's not meant to belittle Kevin and his, his staff in any way. The question really I have, though, is that, hugely impressive as it is, I'm not sure if we need that degree of detail. I mean, I looked at box 3 and page 2 in this, and for the record, Chair, let me say, I didn't have one eye in Match of the Day and one eye reading the papers. You know, but as I say, there's a tremendous amount of detail in here, which quite frankly means little, if anything, to me. And I suspect if colleagues were being honest, they would probably come to the same conclusion. And I wonder if it's not, and that's from the point of view of ignorance, you know, in the best sense of the term. And, you know, I am not under any, you know, I wonder if it wouldn't be possible, perhaps in the future, as it were, you know, to sort of try to reduce the amount of detail. You know, I accept in making the point, Chair, that if we got the box 3 there, key audit message, I would be the first or among the first, you know, to complain about the fact that we didn't have sufficient information, as it were, you know, to allow proper scrutiny to take place. You know, so I'll put my hands up and admit to that. But, you know, I think there's got to be a balance struck, and I'm not quite sure, Chair, and that's not, as I say, I'm not under any circumstances impugning Kevin's, you know, integrity or ability, but I'm not sure if this report in particular quite strikes that balance as far as I'm concerned. The comments are made on a genuine basis, as I've said, and I'd be grateful, you know, to receive, through you, I'd be grateful to receive Kevin or indeed anyone else's comments or response on that.
I think the auditor would be between a rock and a hard place, really, because,
Appreciate that.
Because if there's not enough detail, we'll complain that there's not enough detail. If there's too much detail, we'll complain that there's too much detail. Kevin, do you want to make a comment on that, or will we move on to the next?
Chair, thank you. I mean, I do welcome the remarks. Councillor Geddes has made similar comments previously, and I think he has a valid point because the problem, so far as he's concerned, has continued. Can I be very blunt? I'm not writing the report twice. Okay, so it's very much up to the committee. You can, as a committee, and you're looking later at how you want to operate, you can choose what you want to receive from me. My contention or my belief is that you should be looking in full at audit reports that I produce, because that is the only way you're going to find out whether or not I'm doing a good job, whether it's being comprehensive, and how the heck we're spending our time. Because a job like this does take a considerable amount of time. The reason it does is because we cover a great deal of ground, and that's what's present in the report. And if you wish to receive summary reports or shorter reports, that can be done. I'm quite content with that. But you will have to deal with the observation, probably from external audit at some point, about how do you know what internal audit is doing and whether what they're doing is worthwhile or not. So it's very much up to you. I mean, I'd be quite content for members, if you want to receive a summary report, I can expand the covering report, put highlights in there, and you don't see these reports as papers. These reports will always be on the SharePoint site. So again, in the past, we've referred you to that. If you want to see any of our reports from the past or any current reports, you can go to the SharePoint site and see them. So it's very much up to the style of the committee how you want to run it. But it's necessary for me to produce this level of detail in reporting to the service because they wish to be satisfied about what I've covered and what I have to say about it. And in some ways, when it's a good report like this with no recommendations in it, that's a point of great importance to them, that all the things I've covered and looked at, they can say, we're okay on those, we can get a tick in those boxes. And that to them, that confirmation from us is quite important. If it's not important to members that that level of detail is provided, I will quite happily produce a summary position here.
Well, I say, first of all, I'm extremely grateful to Kevin, not for the first time, let me say, for the professional and the courteous response. But as far as I'm concerned, it does raise an issue. And I'm not going to suggest we come to that decision today because we were accused legitimately of making policy in the hoof. But I personally feel that we should be looking at whether or not, you know, for the purposes of this committee, albeit with the caveat that Kevin has already indicated, that we might in fact attract less than favourable comments from the external auditor, you know, if we go down this route. I still feel that we should be looking, as it were, Chair, at whether or not, you know, we need that level. And again, I'm particularly grateful for the candid comment about this is produced primarily for the service, and it's been brought to us as well. Now, is there a halfway house? And I do take the point, you know, as we strip out staff, those staff remaining are under ever more pressure. I'm not in the business of making work for officials for the sake of it. But I think this is an issue or an area that I personally would like to revisit like to revisit in a structured fashion, as I say, and I really am grateful to Kevin for his response, which would allow me personally to do that, and I would ask that we give further consideration to that, albeit I would be interested to hear what colleagues have got to say.
We'll discuss that when we come to recommendations. Councillor McKee, you're next.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I agree with Councillor Geddes to a certain extent. There's information here. I found it very hard reading. And we've got a questionnaire the other week there about the time we spend reading papers. And this year when I covered all the hours I put down for reading papers in a week. I found it hard going and sometimes difficult to understand, but I have a better understanding of the type of work and the amount of work that people have to do to cover the payments that we receive for all the different areas and how we deal with it. But there's one on page 18 under 416.3, the last 3 lines. We noted, however, for 4 of the warrants in July 2014, one of the Northgate job, Bailiff's instruction report, had not been run. Subsequently, it was recognised that this did not contribute to assurance and this job has ceased to be run permanently. Now, for 4 warrants to be issued, how else could they be checked that it had been addressed? As I say, the reports are thorough, and I kind of go along with Councillor Geddes in that we need to know, do we need as much information all the time? They're certainly thorough reports.
Can you answer Councillor McKee's specific
Yes.
question, please, and then we'll come back.
Yes, the production of the bailiff's report, the bailiff's instruction report, is a step, is a process. And all we were observing here was we looked at the process as it was supposed to be operated, and we found that one step of it hadn't been carried out. The next stage was, but that stage had been missed out. So we looked at that and said, well, it's missing. What's the significance of that? And the conclusion we came to was it had no significance whatsoever. So in arriving at that conclusion, we discussed that with the service and said, you actually don't need to run these reports. They're not being used for any control purpose, which actually has saved them time. It's taken one of the steps away. So it's like 5 stages, and stage 3 isn't really needed because stage 4 covers it and stage 5 covers it. So the warrants were checked, they were fully checked. It's just that particular report wasn't produced, and it doesn't need to be.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dryburgh.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I've got a lot of sympathy with what Alistair actually says with regards to the reports. I've also got a lot of sympathy with you know, Kevin's got a job to do at the end of the day, and that's specific for the different departments. But I also have to remind Kevin that he has said to us in the past, perhaps you don't scrutinise enough my reports. Maybe it's because you've got too much in the report that we don't scrutinise it enough. So the situation is maybe there is a happy balance that we can actually look at in a sort of overview report to us on the respective reports that you're doing, Kevin, on the audits that you're actually doing. And I think that would be useful because with them we could ask you the questions on the work that you've actually carried out.
Thank you. Okay, can we move on to the next report, please?
I take it, Chair, we'll not take. Oh, sorry, I beg pardon. Yeah.
I was going to do them all at once and then go back to the final recommendation.
Sorry.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, next report, has anyone got any questions? No?
Members, I would draw your attention in particular to the final paragraph of the benefits report. If you got that far.
Up in the benefit process.
Yes. 517.2.
Councillor McKee.
You don't mind, Chair? On page 3, it's 521. We've got an unsatisfactory here. What has been done to address that? It's access to Northgate is available to a restricted span of employees. Security is complex. What's being done to overcome that?
Chair, in effect, the answer is at 523. Historically, should we say, when you set a new system up, there tends to be a bit of enthusiasm to get people on and get it up and working. So it certainly happened with payroll, it certainly happened with accounts to some extent. Blocks of users were put on the system to start them up. What then is missing is you don't have individual authorisation for those, and normally what we'd expect to do is for that to be revisited later. And we found with the council tax system, which is of some age, that they cannot produce those authorisations for individual users, which is not satisfactory in terms of control arrangements and access and so on, but it isn't mission critical, so to speak. At 523, what we're saying is that as if they do reports, if this new thing that's been made available to them, if they actually do this, they'll identify accounts which are on the system but which have not been used for some time. And what they should do then is start shutting those down. Because if there are still users on the system who haven't used their accounts for several months, then it's clearly not needed. It usually means the person's left or has different job requirements or something of that kind. So it takes us back to Councillor Collins's point earlier, which was to say people having access to databases, do they need that access? Is it required? And how are they using the system? Well, this would be one method for making sure that we don't have users on the system who don't need access to it. So the answer is really at 523, is if they do that, it will be fine.
Just, if you don't mind, Chair, just as a matter of interest, if that was somebody had left and their access wasn't blocked, could they access it from outside, or is there security to stop that?
For most of our systems, the only way you can access them is by being on the council's network. But there are partners, particularly in relation to the benefits system. So some of the housing associations, DGHP for instance, have access to our systems that's provided to them, so they can access them from their offices. So that's why it's particularly important in connection with benefits and other systems that, number one, all users sign an undertaking on an annual basis that they will not abuse that information. They'll only use it for the purpose for which it's designed, which is in connection with benefits administration or council tax administration. And number two, that we make sure that those accesses are kept up to date and are accurate, and we have a responsibility to make sure that happens. The system administrators, if you like, need to be very active on this front. It tends to be not done very well by the council. I'm sure you'll recall a couple of years ago, external auditors were majoring on this point across a number of systems for the council, that access control and removing people from systems when they'd left was extremely poor. And there was a general undertaking given that would start to improve that process. And I think we've got somewhere with that, but it's still not perfect by any means.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Before I bring anybody else in, can I just ask about 516.3, please?
Did you say 2 or 3, Chair?
3, please.
3, okay.
I mean, well, the whole section, but in particular about write-offs and not needing to be authorised to write off. That raises huge concerns for me. I'm just asking some questions. Explain to me, please.
Certainly, Chair. What we have is there's a two-step process. I'm sorry to go into a little bit of detail on this. Okay, we have two systems which run and work together. We have the system itself, which officers have access to, and we have a workflow system called W2, which organises and distributes and performance tracks work. Now, through the W2 process, generally speaking, there are checks and processes and so on in that which control who can do what on it. But an officer could, in theory, log directly onto Northgate and interfere with a record and muck about with a record directly in Northgate. They shouldn't, and it should never happen, but in theory that can happen. So we try and draw that distinction here. The PQMA system, as it's called, which is the quality assurance system, is focused on W2 activities. So the checks that take place, the quality control checks take place as a result of W2 work events, but not Northgate events. And so we have a concern there. But there is a write-off report. You do get reports out of Northgate which show things that have been marked for write-off, and checks are made on those as well. So we're not writing off something inappropriate.
An eyeball check is
Yes.
carried out to look over for any obvious anomalies.
Yes.
That's quite alarming.
Well,
for me.
It should be okay. It's not something we're tagging as a concern. We've got it as a maybe, but nothing we've seen so far would cause us to press an alarm button on it, let's put it that way. So it's just in documenting this, is again, with great respect to you members, that's why I document it at this level of detail. So we've captured this, we know about this, we're aware of it, it's a small possibility, but it's not a big risk, and at the moment we've got no cause to be overly concerned about it.
Okay. And 517?
Yeah.
I'm presuming there isn't.
This 517.2, Chair. Yes. Yes, it's a concern. I'm drawing it to your attention. The National Fraud Initiative, the Council's performance in connection with the National Fraud Initiative gets reported to Audit Scotland, who produce national reports on the process, and councils who don't participate or are less than diligent in participation tend to get named and shamed a bit. So it's something that we just need to make sure as a council we are participating in it to a fullest extent, and we just have a small anomaly at the moment in that we haven't got a coordinator for the process at the present time, and I am concerned that the absence of that coordinator may mean that we don't wind up participating fully in the exercise, which would attract criticism of the council by Audit Scotland.
I think it's important that we find a coordinator. Anyway, I have some members, Councillor Collins, Councillor McKee and Councillor Geddes.
Thanks, Chair. It was just Kevin made reference earlier on to access to the system in relation to DGHP as an example. Does that mean that DGHP have access to all of the information held, or is it limited to that information that's relevant to DGHP?
It's possible, I think, for them to access the system, which means that they can access any record. However, they're well aware, individuals who are users of the system are fully aware that all of their activities are tracked and logged. We have had occasion where a challenge has been raised in connection with the conduct of an officer, and it is possible to look at the log of their work and what they've looked at and what records they've accessed. And as I say, all users of the system are required to sign undertakings on an annual basis about the use of this information. Many years ago, we had an issue. There was something of a fight developed about the purpose to which this data could be put. I won't say very much more than that. But it was established very clearly what the protocols are, and whilst people might have the opportunity to use this information, basically, if they get caught doing it, they are in serious difficulty. The council would take disciplinary action against any member of its staff, and for any of its partner agencies, it would have them, yes, very much so. So yes, I think this is the problem. Benefits data is sensitive data, but it is important for efficiency that we give that access, at least partial access to that system, to DGHP, who can then assist us and assist their clients or their tenants with the whole process of benefit claims and information and processing and paying landlords and all that sort of stuff. So it works better for the customer at the end of the day, but it does have certain risks about abuse of information or potential abuse of information.
Thank you. I'm thinking of it in tandem with the Common Housing Register and such like, and so therefore any housing provider across Dumfries and Galloway is likely to have that access, and it is open to abuse if someone were so inclined. Yeah. That concerns me somewhat.
I think at the present time, not all social landlords have this access, but DGHP does for sure, I know that, and that's to do with the size and scale of their operation, obviously. We are moving, or we're trying to move to self-serve, and so the idea is that we'll give clients the ability to update their records using computer facilities at libraries or at, from home or whatever. And again, that's going to bring about enormous efficiencies and improvements for customers themselves, because information is put in once, it's put in correctly by them, and it's captured at the earliest point in time so that actions can be taken on it. So again, there are implications about elements of that. But in my experience, this is an area that's very diligently attended to by colleagues in revenues. They're very, very careful about the use of this information. And as I say, they come down like a ton of bricks on any evidence at all that it might have been abused.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. 516.5. It's how often do the company policy and resources to get authorisation for the written off payments?
It should be, Chair, an annual process. It hasn't always been an annual process. I would like it to be more frequent. I would like it to be a 6-monthly process, but approximately annually.
It's just that you've got one here, £8,000 written off in April.
Yes.
When that should have been in before now, I take it.
Yes, it was an amount which was written off and wasn't included in the previous write-off report. So technically speaking, it hasn't been written off until such time as committee gives its endorsement. So that one has to get hooked back and will get put into the next write-off report that will go forward, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Because it does actually say prior to approval.
Yes.
Councillor Geddes.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just on the back of Kevin's response to Councillor McKee there, he says he would like it to be more frequent. Is there an impediment, to that? And if so, what's the nature of the impediment? That would be my first question. And the second question would be on the back of echoing your sentiments with the appointment of a coordinator, with the clear caveats that we got from Kevin. How can we as a committee ensure, in fact, that that is done, and if not forthwith, with a due degree of expediency?
Kevin?
Sorry, Chair, can you just make the second point again?
The appointment of the coordinator.
Yes, okay.
I think Derek might take the one to do with the coordinator. But
okay, thank you.
Okay, and sorry, what was your first question?
And the other one was in the back of Jock's question, that you were saying, in fact, that you would like it to come more frequently. And I'm asking, Chair, is there an impediment to that? So what is it? And perhaps can we as a committee be of assistance in that regard?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I apologise. Yes, there was a stage at which we had got an undertaking from the service to do it 6 monthly, but operationally they seem to have difficulties with that. It's something we lean on them from time to time and say, when is your next write-off report? It is quite a large coordination job. So revenues do it on behalf of the council as a whole. So we have sundry debtor accounts going in here, which are really the property of other services as well as council tax, and as well as benefit overpayment write-offs. So it is quite a big job to put it together. There's a process involved where they double check, if you like, that things are marked for write-off are indeed to be written off. And that there is no prospect of recovery on them. So it just takes them a while to put the report together, Chair. So it seems annually seems to be about what they can manage to do. But there isn't a fundamental impediment other than a resource requirement to do it.
Well, I have quite a concern about that though, because it says here, I mean, it's like it's taken it to committee really to pay lip service, because it said that it's been written off prior to going to committee. So therefore, it's done,
It's a fait accompli.
Well, yes. I mean,
and committee makes the decision. Councils are supposed to make the decision.
Yes.
However, that decision's already been made and dealt with before it approaches a committee.
Well, we get into something quite interesting, as you say, which is what is the purpose and function of the committee. It's a traditional area of concern for councils that write-offs are not done lightly and that they're very, very controlled. So the break point, the £5,000, is a clear message to officers to say anything in excess of that should be reported to committee, and members should have an opportunity to ask questions about them and discuss them. That seems to me to be reasonable. In practice, what do we mean by write-off? It's an accounting entry, and the point at which the accounting entry is made is actually done after the committee report. But in operational terms, in terms of pursuing debt, putting resources in, all that sort of stuff, that activity can stop some months before the write-off. So an account in the system, in the council tax system, or the benefits system, or indeed the sundry debtors system, can be marked for write-off, and action will cease on that. And that can take place 11 months before the report goes to committee. So it's a question of there's an operational requirement, there's an accounting requirement, and there's a governance requirement, which don't mesh perfectly. But the idea is, look, certainly for anything above £5,000, members should be concerned, and it should be reported to members, and they should endorse them.
Well, therefore, it should be easier for taking a report to committee every 6 months rather than every 12 months, because your 6 months block will be less than it would be if you had to do it over a 12-month period. And it would be a committee decision as to whether the write-offs were made.
Yes, Chair, it's my
So
contention.
really,
as well.
until
Yes.
that decision's taken, you should still be pursuing that money.
Yes, theoretically, but it's kept on the system, but there's no physical activity taking place in connection with it, let's put it that way. Yes, I would...
I know exactly what you're saying, but I'm just saying...
Well, I would agree, Chair, that a more regular write-off report to committee would be advantageous. It would reduce the amount of work required to compile the report, which, its frequency is better, but operationally, the service doesn't seem to be able to support that hitherto, so...
Councillor Geddes?
Well, I would have thought as the part of the function and role of this committee, we, without reducing it to emotive terms, Chair, I think we should be supporting our officer in this regard and saying, look, we feel that this is not unreasonable. And the internal auditor is certainly of the view that he feels it would be a reasonable recommendation. And I personally feel, Chair, that we should go on record, in fact, that we're supporting that and take the appropriate action with a view to getting it implemented.
I think under the recommendations we're asked to note and comment.
Aye, well, otherwise...
I think we would probably send our comments to Policy and Resources Committee so that they're fully aware of what we feel as an audit committee.
Exactly so, yes.
Chair, I do on a 3-year cycle a review of write-offs. So I can't, I'm sorry, it escapes me just at the moment when the next one is due. It may well be 2015. So can I give you an undertaking that in the next report which I do, I will raise that specifically as an issue and as a recommendation. And as a result of that, it will come back before this committee with officers' observations on it at that point. They'll either accept the recommendation, agree to do it, or they'll come up with why they can't do it. And perhaps that's the point at which to have an extended discussion on it.
Members, are you happy with that?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Collins?
Thank you. I recognise Kevin's reference to resource and such like in the department and the fact that they have to satisfy DWP requirements as well. But is it not the case that a lot of this information is held within a number of databases that don't interface with one another, and the compilation of the detail is actually done from hard copy printouts that the officers need to sit down and compile physically rather than it being an electronically based produced paper summary?
Are we talking about write-offs here?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Yes, that's very much the case. What the Council is describing, it's very helpful to say we have 3 systems effectively where we have write-offs: sundry debtors, council tax, and benefit overpayments. Now, benefit overpayments are the least number of write-offs. Council tax write-offs are controversial, complex, and we are reluctant to do it because the council takes the view correctly that we will pursue that debt wherever we can. So we have debt going back many, many years, 10, 11 years in some cases, that's still on the system, still being recorded. And sundry debtors, which is where the largest number and cost of write-offs occurs, and that covers everything. That covers from raising accounts for wasp nests, destroying wasp nests, right through to anything you care to think of. And that's where the complexity sits. The team that put together the write-off report have to, as you say, in effect produce printouts, sit down, work it all out. There's quite a lot of manual intervention required to package it and to put it into a report for members to look at. And in the past, in the write-off report, we've commented sometimes about the reliability of some figures in some areas of the write-off report. So in the past, efforts have been made since that time to improve the information. So what's coming before members, although they're just numbers and probably not that meaningful to members, nevertheless they should be accurate numbers. So that's where the focus has been. It is a bit of a job to put it together. There was an undertaking or a commitment given within the service to try and do it more frequently. That followed a period when in fact we had a 2-year period when no write-up report had come before members at one stage. So following that they agreed to try and bring it more frequently, and we agreed about 6 months would be great. but it wasn't a specific recommendation, and they've not been able to fulfil that requirement, which is why I'm suggesting in the next report, I think it's probably time to say, no, we need more regular write-offs.
I think it'd be quite interesting if you brought a write-off report to Policy and Resources Committee and somebody moved that something wasn't to be written off.
It would be very interesting, wouldn't it?
Yes.
I'm sure that could be arranged, Chair.
Because obviously they've been written off already. You know.
I think again, though, Chair, that we're highlighting an area of operation which has historically developed and that we seem to be stuck with. Now, we've been pushing for a long time for some sort of rationale being achieved in relation to the interfacing of these databases. And when it comes to resources, if that interfacing is facilitated, there isn't a drain on resources. So a 6-monthly report wouldn't be inappropriate because it wouldn't be onerous if the proper systems were in place and speaking to one another. So I don't know how we take that one forward, but I think that is the most positive step that this committee could be making, a recommendation that this committee could be making at this point in time in relation to rationalising the process and making it more efficient and user-friendly.
Something that we can put in. Right, we're moving on then. The last one, review of data protection risk management, Chief Exec Services. Members, there is an action plan on here. Has anybody got any questions on this particular paper?
Use of personal information. I thought we were obliged when we asked people for personal information like that. We indicated to them where it may be used with their permission. If it's signed off that it may be exchanged with the likes of health service and people like that. I thought that was part of the registering when they gave the personal information, but it was only with their permission that it would be exchanged with other groups.
Kevin, I think that's correct.
Yes, Chair. We have what are called, well, we used to have something called fair processing notices. So as information is being received from people, they're advised as to the potential uses of that. You know, from, I shouldn't say this, but from an audit perspective, the sort of overriding purpose of any data should be in connection with combating fraud. We've referred to the National Fraud Initiative earlier. But, you know, that's not the only area really for the council. It's as much about improving customer service and trying to improve customer experience as well. So, yes, customers are told, they are advised, and they are, in effect, they give their consent, usually at the point of capture of that information where it's being used. This report is about the Chief Executive Service, which actually has very little data protection exposure. We have the domestic arrangements for the department, but we also provide support across the whole of the council. So this is a dual report in the sense of it covers the home arrangements as well as the strategic arrangements, and that's why there are 6 recommendations in this. 2 of these relate to the strategic service that we provide, and 4 relate to the domestic arrangements on it. But yes, fair processing notices and the like are very important. Without those, the council can be perceived to be in breach of the law if it didn't have those in place.
Councillor Driver?
I'm actually going to present Kevin with a scenario that's actually going to look at the 3 reports that he's put in front of us, all right? And it's actually a live case, that the case management, because I'm doing at the moment, with regards somebody who had his council tax, he was on benefits, therefore he had to pay the water charges. You don't get any benefits from the water charges, you've got to pay that. And he hadn't paid it for, you know, so many years, and he's now, you know, a couple of £1,000 in arrears. And I'm going to ask the officer who had a look at this for an email, because I was advised by the constituent that he never got any letters saying that he owed this much, you know, and that type of thing. So to get an email response from an officer saying, when were the letters sent, what letters were sent, can you advise me what information was given? He said something about he had the wrong postcode on and all this sort of thing, like letters. It was how he managed to know he had the wrong postcode. The letter must have got to him anyway, you know, and things like that. So putting the three scenarios together here and looking at data protection, would that be something that is easy for me, from an officer, to be given that information, or would there be any data information that would be too sensitive to send?
That data sounds like personal data, but not personal sensitive data. Okay, so there are fewer restrictions. There are still restrictions on personal data, but many fewer than personal sensitive data. So I'm not entirely clear, I must confess, as to whether the councillor is asking me whether an exercise could be done to establish this in reality or in theory. But the difficulty we have with our customers is that sometimes they're reluctant, or indeed they're not in a strong position to make payments to the council. So we deal with very many people in that situation, and we deal with a huge variety of excuses, shall we say. And all we can ever do is set up a process which is designed to encourage people. We give them opportunities and options to pay. We follow up nice reminder letters, what are called soft letters initially, firmer letters. We go through a whole sort of series of processes. Now, it is feasible, I suppose, for somebody to be completely unaware that those communications are coming to them and they're not receiving them, or they're not opening them, and these sorts of things. It happens. But eventually there comes a point when we have to collect the debt, and we usually send a nice sheriff officer around at that point to knock on the door and speak to the person. And although nobody likes bailiffs, as they used to be called, turning up at your house, to be honest, they're very, very good at their job, and they don't go in with big sticks and they talk to people and say, what are your circumstances? And if we get a story back, the sheriff officer will bring that back to us and say, this customer is saying this, would you like to have a look at it? And we do that. We take away the information that we received and we look into the debt case and so on. And as always, we are prepared to make instalment arrangements for people who find themselves in difficulties, so that if they haven't got the money to pay us what they owe us, we will attempt to accommodate their ability to pay through an instalment arrangement. Always, for instance, in connection with a caveat on council tax, that they pay the current year's liability. So there's no point in accepting money off somebody in connection with a debt, and that debt just increases because they're not paying on current year. So the parameters, if you like, for recovery are always about meet your current liability and we'll give you an instalment arrangement for any arrears. That's how it works. Now, it is possible, yes, that somebody could be that ignorant, but we're not that awful. We're not really not.
No, it's just taken into consideration with an earlier report from complaints. This guy's one of these guys that complain all the time as well.
Okay, can we just bring it back to this particular paper, because I'm conscious of the time and we've got a seminar and there's another committee due to start at 2 o'clock, so we're going to be
I doubt if you'll get your seminar the day, Chair, but we'll talk about that afterwards.
Councillor Gavin, do you wish to ask a question
Yes,
on this
please
particular
do.
paper?
If I may. Page 2 of the report, Chair, action number 4. A policy to prevent sensitive personal data being stored on email will be put in place, and the timescale, Chair, is June the 15th, and the ranking is first ranking, addressing a significant weakness. My question in relation to that Chair, would be, is it deemed in the circumstances that June the 15th is sufficiently early to address a significant weakness, or should we not be looking to bring that forward? That's the first one. And the second one is comparatively, presumably straightforward, 9.5. The paperwork awaiting scanning and late processing is not filed in an orderly way. Can I be reassured, Chair, that that's done deliberately and not like my own filing out of chaos?
Kevin, could you answer those questions, please?
Yes, Chair. 9.5 first. Yes. The real reason it's not filed in an orderly way is because it comes in it's in effect it's stacked in the order in which it comes in, which is completely random. I think it's a slightly sly remark, really, or comment, just to say, if you were hunting for something specific, if you were bad enough to break into the offices and were hunting for something specific, good luck with finding it in the pile of, stuff that's there, sort of thing. But it's a semi-light-hearted comment. But yes, that's the reason why. It's because it comes in randomly. Timescale on that action. It is a Category 1 action. It's important. It's Category 1. Not because of a particular failing on anybody's part. It's a Category 1 because of the potential of reputational damage to the council. So June 15, I think, is a reasonable time to try and work up a policy and get it out and embedded in services. It may be quite challenging because although we don't think there's a large quantity of particularly personal sensitive data going into emails, and the email system is pretty secure, but nevertheless it's about stuff being in places that you forget about. So all emails are archived after 6 months. So that means if an email has got some sensitive data in it, then that becomes stored somewhere else, and then people forget about it. And the opportunity for access to it is quite limited, but it shouldn't be in there. It should be processed or dealt with or removed prior to that point, and that's what this is all about.
Grateful, Chair. Thank you.
Move to recommendation. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, just on that point, and it's an interesting point, and Kevin's referred to, the type of information, some that is more sensitive than others, and it's just on casework for an elected member, and the person provides the information, and you need to put it in email, or is the habit and repute that you put it in email to a department, and that's held in email.
Yes.
Now, accepting that we are data controllers as much as anyone else in the council, it's really a policy that it says here to prevent. It will be saved in email.
Yes. Well, it
will be held, and that could be the things like where you stay, medical condition, and so forth and so on. There's no saying what that kind of information is, but it's held and it's fed back also in response to that casework. So it is held. The policy has got to be sensitive and give clear information and guidance on that.
It will be quite challenging. It's a challenging job. But
And that's the second time you've said that, which worries me slightly. I wouldn't like to see the slippage coming in for June 2015, because obviously it has a Category 1, and Councillor Geddes has quite rightly raised that. I believe we'll have a meeting in March, I think.
5th.
I think we would like to know that it's going to be on target, please.
Good.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
Recommendations. So we've been asked to note and comment on the internal audit reports, which we have done, and I'm presuming that our comments will be gathered and be fed back in a minute. I think there was one specific thing that we wanted recorded. It was regarding the comments that we wanted sent to the Policy and Resources Committee. So members are happy with that? Okay.
Chair, can we also can we also consider, though, I'm taking it that will be part of the decision, that looking at the future format of these reports, as I said earlier, I think it's, well, I personally feel it's an area we should look at. I'm not going to suggest under any circumstances we try to make policy in the hoof, but I think, to that extent, maybe a report to a future early meeting, if that's possible.
Well, I think we could have to an early meeting what the possibilities would be, because I think that we do need to have some sort of detail. I quite appreciate there's a lot of detail in this particular report that you referred to this morning. I personally like detail, but I can appreciate that we could maybe get a halfway house. So if there was a forward, maybe even saying, here's my summary report, but the detail's there, and if people need to read the detail, they need to read the detail. But I think you're right, we need to discuss it further, but it's not for today. So if we could bring something back, that would be helpful.
Could you just clarify, Chair, there was one, the question was Kevin's going to come back, and that's the one on process.
Yes.
Can we have that noted?
It will be noted, the process to do with
pay points.
Will be fed back. Okay, members, thank you very much.
The write-offs and the
policy and resources one that was carried.
Yes, but
That's going to policy and resources.
Yeah. Well, we agreed that we were going to put in place.
Just through you, Chair, just so we are clear, I think in terms of the write-offs, the position was that Kevin was bringing back a report in 6 months, and that would contain the potential for that to be a 6-monthly cycle, but the report would include the comment from officers on whether the feasibility of that could be achieved. That was my understanding.
Yeah, I agree with that, yeah.
So just for
But,
me,
yeah, but the point I was making was that there are 3 different computer systems. Hard copies have been taken off of, and then officers are having to compile the detail from 3 sets of hard copies, and that's where errors can crop up, and understandably so. How do we make recommendation with regard to accelerating the means by which these 3 computer systems can be interfaced and give a more efficient, more effective method of working and accuracy?
Kevin, is that the subject of a...
Yes, Chair. As I say, I can address that. The compilation process for the write-off is complex, and I very much take the councillor's points, which is if that process can be improved in some way, it will contribute towards the ability to make it more regular.
Can you make sure that's in the next report?
Yes, that can be included in. It gives me a good perspective for carrying out the audit. So yes, I'm quite happy to do that, Chair.
Thank you.
Members, half an hour and then we'll start the seminar, or 20 minutes, or if you're happy to eat your sandwich and drink your coffee at the same time, we'll start in 15 minutes.
Sandwiches a day.
Cheers.
Johnny and Bart.
We're having to go. We're having to go. Willie's having to go. We're going to be less going out and just a rump.